Memento Mori is a Latin phrase meaning, remember you will die. I recently made a video about this devotion on my other secular YouTube channel, also named Veritas on the Rocks, which isn't a Catholic-specific channel. I wanted to explain it to non-Catholics. This is the version of my Memento Mori talk, especially for Catholics. There's a lot to delve into here from a religious point of view, so let's get to it. I'm Regina Lux, and you're watching Veritas on the Rocks, Catholic Edition. Most people might think of this devotion as a uniquely Catholic one, which is partly why I made a secular video about it. However, I have personally encountered many Catholics who take issue with this devotion, calling it dark, therefore it takes away from the focus of the light of Christ. I've seen non-Catholic Christians claim that it is clearly demonic. I can actually understand why they might believe that, but it's due to not having a full awareness of the differences between dark and demonic. While yes, there can be an overlap of some symbolism, they don't go hand in hand. Something dark can make light of heavy things, such as suffering, death, fate, relatable parts of the human experience, which is why some people can have dark humor. Something demonic goes squarely against God, something divine or His goodness, or tries to put us on equal footing with God. Motivation also plays a role in whether or not something can be viewed as squarely demonic. I'll give you an example. I have a giant dragon skeleton in my house. Is that to glorify the demonic? Absolutely not. Although uneducated people might believe that it is. It's actually the opposite. A dragon is a symbol of the demonic or the devil. A dragon's skeleton is a mocking of the demonic's power, a commentary on your desire to stand against it. I have a bronze dragon head mounted on my wall, my husband's bronze wedding anniversary gift to me. It's much like the concept of gargoyles. When I took art history in college, my professor shocked everyone by telling us a reason for gargoyles in churches was to remind the faithful that Satan is always around, and the most earnestly demons will try to distract you is during the Mass, especially during consecration. They don't want you to focus your prayer or unite as much as possible to God in that moment. Now look, churches have been sanitized. Not only the beauty stripped, but the reminder that the demonic exists and are on a constant prowl for your soul. So there is a difference between Memento Mori symbolism and demonic symbolism. Just because a symbol or a concept might make one uncomfortable doesn't make it evil. Suffering can have a good purpose, but we generally aren't keen to go through it, despite the fact that it can bring us closer to God. Memento Mori also seeks to bring us closer to God. It pulls focus away from our earthly life by reminding us how human and weak we truly are, so we focus on bettering our everlasting souls for heaven. Our bodies will die, and our lives are so short compared to our eternities. It's important to remember that. It's also important to remember the stark contrast between our earthly forms and our heavenly ones, and gives a greater nod to the glory of God. It also gives greater comprehensive significance to the non-decomposition of some saints' bodies and relics, pointing towards the power of God and His will to do as He wishes on this earth. Catholics especially ought not fear our death. Easier said than done, though, isn't it? People will be shocked at what they will make not only into false gods, but false devils. Chesterton has a great quote about this.
Idolatry is committed, not merely by setting up false gods, but also by setting up false devils, by making men afraid of war or alcohol or economic law, when they should be afraid of spiritual corruption and cowardice.
Death can become a false devil when we live in fear of it. That is why embracing this devotion of Memento Mori can be very important and even healing for some people. Facing our own mortality can actually be the most freeing thing in the world. Memento Mori isn't to make a mockery of death. It is, in a way, to make light of it. Because when you make light of something, you can truly face it. It no longer has a big, scary hold on you, and it no longer controls you. Staring at something in the face, embracing it for what it is, means you nor it can hide any longer. You finally face off with your fear, and you size it up and see how much it truly controls you. Facing your fear is when you learn what you're made out of. It's when you learn whether or not you are tough enough to handle it. But more importantly, it's also when you learn how much you lean on God. Or don't. At the same time, while making light of death, it's also a heavy reflection. You see, most people aren't actually afraid of dying. That might come as a surprise. What we actually fear is not leaving behind a legacy. Some people are afraid to die because they want to be remembered for the remainder of their loved ones' lives. Other people are more afraid than others to die because they desire to leave behind a great legacy where they will be remembered for all of time. Here's the fact of the matter. Most people, even the greatest innovators, aren't remembered for the rest of time. You can probably only name a couple people from the Middle Ages, and believe it or not, more than a couple people were alive then. Yet everyone, in their own way, helped shape our world into what it is now, with their small daily actions and ripple effect. Now, think about someone more recent. Who was your favorite musician when you were a teenager? When was the last time you listened to one of their songs? Will they be remembered by the masses in 100 years? So it's time that you confront the reality that no, you will likely not be remembered on a grand scale, and that's okay. You don't need to be in order to live a fulfilling life. You don't need a lot of people to think about you daily in order to leave behind a legacy. Understand that the ripple effect exists and seek to do as much good as you can now in order to leave the world a better place when you die. And you'll find consolation in that. Telling yourself, I'm working today to leave the world better when I die, will fill your daily actions and your life overall with more meaning, and you won't be afraid to face death when he comes, because you won't have regrets. Memento Mori also works to put things into perspective this way. It makes you reflect on what is important and what smaller life things ought not to control you. St. Teresa of Avila sums this up well when she says, "Let nothing perturb you, nothing frighten you. All things pass. God does not change." Focusing on Memento Mori will put a greater importance on your daily tasks, which in turn provides a reflection on whether or not you are working with God, not only in your daily actions, but overall in your life. In truth, there have been tons of beautiful pieces of art about this topic, featuring skulls. There's tons of beautiful somber music about the reflection of death. One of the things Catholicism is great at is taking something potentially scary and showing that it doesn't need to be ugly. Suffering, pain, death, they can still be beautiful if viewed properly. The cross is an instrument of torture, and we wear it around our necks. Not because we are morbid. It's by this cross that we gain access to the most splendid of things, heaven. We don't shy away from potentially dark things, because it is by the light that we can see their true beauty. Catholics were so metal, they made some churches out of bones. And for the record, I totally want my bones made into a chandelier, so that even in death, I can still bring light. People might still argue that Memento Mori is too dark, and too many people have taken the darkness of Memento Mori to mean something sinister, such as, your life doesn't matter, like some sad goths. But you do matter, and your life matters, and that's kind of the point. Your life matters, your death matters. We have a saint of the happy death, Saint Joseph, terror of demons. I hope you have a happy death. It's honestly one of our greatest human desires in life. People who are not devoted to Memento Mori will sometimes take it to mean that no matter what we do with our lives, it's pointless, when Memento Mori means quite the opposite. It reminds us to fill our lives with doing as much good as possible, to leave behind a society that is better off because we lived in it, to leave behind a more sanctified society because we lived our faith resoundingly. People think that not striking things off a bucket list should be the cause of life's regrets. It ought not be. The cause of life's regrets shouldn't be that you didn't do something that you wanted to do, or that you didn't directly affect enough people. No, the cause for life's regrets shouldn't be the unlived life. It should be that you didn't live in a way that magnifies God's goodness and the goodness you have to offer other individuals, the church, society, and the world. Whether or not someone remembers you isn't what should drive you. Rather, it ought to be the self-assurance that you used your time wisely. It ought to be the assurance that you spent your time as God would have you, and not chasing after fame or fortune or to be remembered by the masses. Look at how many great saints lived their lives. Look at how they lived out their daily devotions. They did so simply. It's those daily tasks and devotions with a focus on God and His will for them on earth that made them into God's tools to further His kingdom from heaven. Even those saints who were given great accolades and titles while on earth still did things to humble themselves, to remind themselves that they are still dust, and to dust they would return. It was in their humbling that elevated their souls. It was not in their focusing on earthly affirmation that they could truly unite with God and dedicate themselves to His will, forsaking earthly love for heavenly. And it was by that God rose them to the higher title of saint. Their lives' fulfillment wasn't that they did everything on a bucket list or had tons of fans. Children who die early in their lives are generally remembered for a very long time by those who love them, even those who never open their eyes. They affect those who they leave behind so greatly. Do you know what they are usually remembered for? Their loving, innocent example. They're remembered for the beautiful life lessons they taught others in their simplicity. Those lessons are the ones that affect people until they die. They might not be remembered by a ton of people, but they inspire those whom they leave behind who loved them. They usually inspire people with their mere short life's example to be better. Adults who die are more than capable of leaving behind the same impact. Honestly, that is the impact people ought to wish they leave behind, teaching others courage and love through the example of their lives. And, if you're Catholic, teaching others the love of God by being God's love to them. It's wonderful and great to be an innovator. It's amazing to be a great leader who stands up to make the world a better place. But the motivation for doing so shouldn't be to leave behind a legacy or gather fans. It should be working to create yourself into the kind of person God wills you to be, working with Him to change the world and the church for the better. People can write books, create product, work as church leaders, but at the end of the day, did their lives' work change others for the better? Or did they alienate people, work for causes that harmed others in order to line their own pockets the years they spend on this plane? What about Catholic leaders who behave this way? You know a tree by its fruit. If a Catholic leader does not edify the Catholic Church with their life, then they've wasted their life. If a Catholic leader makes God or the Church's tradition, doctrine, into something it is not, especially in order to attract people, feeding them lies about God or the Church, in order to validate themselves at the expense of the Church and other souls, may God have mercy on them when they die. We have far too many public Catholic figures who do this. When you make the Church and her teachings into something they are not, you deny the truth and beauty of the faith to others. You put their souls in peril. The goal of one's life shouldn't be to gain as much love and admiration as possible. The Veritas is that you cannot be a life-changing presence for some without also being a joke to others. This is especially true for those who stand with the truth against the world. Chesterton once said,
"A dead thing goes with the stream. Only a living thing goes against it."
The Church is a living, breathing thing because it's us. We stand against popular culture and popular thought because humans are fallen and we will always seek out our own authority and comfort, trying to thwart God's boundaries and expectations. The more you seek to change the world for the better, the more people will hate you, simply because more people know you and you stand against relativism. I've even found that within the Catholic Church, Catholics will hate others who stand for the truth because they are uncomfortable or jealous. They feel undermined in their own religious authority, so they go on the attack. They don't take a step back to see the broader picture that God wills to work with each of us and our own abilities to advance His kingdom. Something a lot of people don't realize when they seek to leave a legacy to bring them comfort when they die is that they will likely be hated by many. Our natural inclination is to desire to be loved and valued. We want affirmation for every little thing that we do, and we beat ourselves up when we don't get it, because subconsciously we know that that is part of what we are leaving behind in our legacy. Every single thing we do builds into the legacy, the ripple effect, which we leave behind, which is the reason why even the smallest things we do matter on a much grander scale than people might even realize. And that is a reason why it's important to remember daily that we will die. That piece of gossip, that action to harm another, those kinds of daily actions matter, and they undermine the devotion of Memento Mori, because we forget that one day we will die, and our goal is to get ourselves and as many other people as possible into heaven. You shouldn't fear or hate normal physical things. It's the abnormal that ought to give you pause. That's a reason why the church takes certain stances on certain things. The Veritas is that we are all going to die. That's just how it is. So what is your real fear? Is it irrational, such as fearing the unlived life? Or is it rational, such as never trying to live out our life as God would have us? You can't take the unlived life experiences with you when you're dead. You aren't going to care about riding that roller coaster one last time when you're lying in a coffin. None of that will matter then, and it won't matter in 100 years either. What will matter is whether or not your life gets you into heaven, whether or not you laid a foundation for others to get into heaven, and taught them how to lay their own foundation to teach the same for generations to come. Memento Mori requires you to truly examine who you are and what kind of legacy you wish to leave behind, as well as humbly acknowledging that you will likely not be remembered for all of time by people generations to come. And facing that fact, believe it or not, will be something that makes you happy. It will be what makes you unafraid to face your own mortality, living secure in the knowledge that you daily remembered you were a day closer to death, and therefore tried to fill yourself and others with as much goodness as possible. Remembering your death is what reminds you to live. Are you afraid to daily remember your death? Why? What is making you afraid to die? The best course of action may very well be to examine your conscience and priorities. The truth is that as Catholics, we believe we look forward to heaven, which is the greatest achievement. If you do not believe that, you ought to make some life changes. This has been Regina Lux with Veritas on the Rocks, Catholic edition, wishing you a splendid death. Now, go slay some dragons.